Sharing for everyone?
Yes.
Yeah, perfect. I will begin. I say thank you very, very much for the introduction. So my name's Katie Johnston. I work as part of the engagement team for CIRAS and RSSB. Obviously very much here with my CIRAS hat on today, and basically talking about how listening for safety and how CIRAS fits in with that. So I'm just going to start off very, very briefly. I'm hoping most people are familiar with CIRAS and what we do. If not, a very quick update, a refresh. So as Colin mentioned, CIRAS is a transport sector's confidential safety hotline. Basically what that means is we're here to listen to you or your colleagues when they prefer to report their safety concerns with their identity protected. Or feel that they can't use their internal reporting channels or have tried to, but for whatever various reasons, they haven't had any joy. And really, really importantly, we want to share the message and work with all our members and all their staff across the sector that when we listen, we learn. It's fundamentally one of the basic premise. So we do everything we can to help our members promote an even stronger culture of listening across their businesses. So some fundamentals. I hope this is what everyone expects when they come to work, but that you come to work in a safe and secure environment. You have the relevant training to do whatever task it is you're being asked to do that day, whether that be out on site, whether that be in office, whether that be driving a vehicle, whatever your work entails. You have the correct equipment and protective gear, everything you need in order to carry out that task. You have clear instructions. You know what it is that you're there to do. Also, you have the appropriate facilities available to you, whether that be somewhere to go to the loo, have a break, have the right equipment, everything you need, again, to do your job. And really, really importantly, that you get home safely. I think that's kind of an assumption that most people have, that when they go into work, they're going to come home at the end of the day, safe and sound, uninjured. So those are your kind of fundamentals that hopefully we all expect when we go to work. But what if this is not what happens? What if this is not what you find when you go to work? Really, really simply, you have a choice. You can either say something or you can say nothing. You can speak up or you can stay silent. And that is ultimately everybody's choice on a daily basis when they're going to work and there's something that they don't like, something's not right, it's not working how it should do. But is anybody listening? And do you know who to talk to or how to speak up? Do you know what's the best route to use in different circumstances? And really importantly, if you do speak up, do you feel heard? We focus a lot in the rail sector on speaking up, reporting, challenging. There are all sorts of different processes in place, whether that be talking to your supervisor, raising close calls or near misses, just being able to challenge colleagues on simple things. And there's a really, really massive focus on this across most businesses, and speak up, zero harm, all those types of things. But do we talk about listening? And actually, is listening more important than speaking? Because ultimately, if no one's listening, what's the point of speaking up? You might as well have your mouth taped shut. So this is why we're trying to shift that focus a bit, or at least share the focus, should I say, with speaking up and listening. What is listening? That may sound like a really simple question, but listening is a really, really crucial part of any effective communication. It's actually vital that two parties are talking to each other and actually listening to what's being said. And it's the process of not just hearing someone, but actually receiving that information and then understanding it, being able to process that and think, actually, what is it that this person is trying to say to me? Which also means it gives us the time to respond appropriately, because we can review the information that person is giving us, and then we can give a considered response, as opposed to just, oh yeah, okay, whatever. But we can actually, sit there and go, right, what is it you're asking me? What is it you want to know? And again, really, really importantly, it's two-way. Both parties are involved. It's a conversation. It's not just someone talking to somebody else, or being ranted at or being talked at or whatever it may be, but it's a two-way transaction. So, listening, it's easy, isn't it? Something we all do every day, pretty much since we were born. There's sounds all around us, whether that people speaking or music or various other noises, whatever it might be. But Surely it's a kind of fundamental human skill. Or is it? Is it something we do naturally, or is it something that we can nurture and improve and really get better at? Is it a learnt skill? And interestingly enough, if you think back, actually, how often are you actually taught to listen? Again, we have a lot of focus on how we approach things, how we speak to people, and how we should, you know, phrase certain, concerns we have. But actually, are we taught to listen? As I said, we have two ears, and most people can use them, quite effectively to hear what's going on around them. And actually, that just basic ability to hear, but that is merely noting that someone is speaking or there's a noise, whether that be, as say, part of a conversation, or whether it be warning sounds, or whether it be just ambient noise, or something in the environment around us. But we're just hearing them. But are we actually taking note? Listening is actually taking that a little bit step further and actually making sense of what is being heard. Again, what is that information that is being sent to me? I'm hearing all this stuff, but what am I doing with it? Is it just something that's going through me, or is it something I actually need to process and think, actually, I need to develop a response, or I need to react to this? So really, really simply, hearing is quite a passive thing. It's, something we all do quite naturally. But listening is more active. It actually takes you, you need to consider it. You need to actually sit there and think, right, I've got to do something with this, as opposed to let it pass over me. Yeah, it can be really hard to listen and pay attention. There can be lots of other noise and distractions around you, especially in this day and age with lots of modern technology, all sorts of distractions. We have phones, we have emails. If you're out on site, or even actually if you're just traveling to work or commuting and stuff, there might be warning sounds, other things going on. We've got screens everywhere. In our environment, there's passengers, there's co-workers. So basically, there's lots of other things that can distract you. And I'm sure we've all been there, and I'm sure everyone is obviously avidly listening to every word I say as we go through this, and not checking emails or looking at their phone, or, got a co-worker coming past going, oh, can I just check in with this? Or, and messages popped up on their Teams and this kind of stuff. So it can actually be, whatever our best intentions may be, it can be really, really hard to actually sit there and really listen. And I'm sure we've all experienced when we've been to a webinar, or we have those sort of, all business Teams calls where everyone's involved and whatever, but you're quickly checking your email and you suddenly think, I didn't hear any of that. Can't remember what they just said. So however, willingly we want to listen, it's very easy to distract it, and it can be a lot harder than we think. It can be really, really important to stop and listen, especially if people's safety is dependent upon it. But it's not always the right time. Sometimes you need to focus on the job at hand. You need to get the job done. And sometimes it's necessary just to focus on that task, and close out those other noises and those distractions around us. But then again, this can be a really difficult decision, obviously, because actually if someone's trying to tell you something that is urgent, you need to listen then. We need to be able to filter out, is this someone just, having a bit of banter and catching up after the weekend, or actually is what they're trying to tell me critically important? Is this going to, are they saying something's not right here? So it might be that decision has to be made. So you might need to do a really quick bit of actually, okay, what's the issue? Okay, yeah, that's urgent. We need to deal with that. Actually, I'm really busy at the moment. Can we arrange a time to speak later? So there might need to be a decision. It's not necessarily, drop everything here and now. I've got to listen to you. But that initial assessment might be really, really vital. Are you ready to listen? Now, there are reams and reams of research and advice and top tips, and all sorts of things out there in the internet and elsewhere, with people who have got lots of expertise and have done research and whatever on best ways of listening and what makes top tips, etc. So I've just tried to pull together some of the key things from some of those bits of advice. One of the really most important things, actually, if you want to listen to someone, is to be present. So that means, actually take the time out to sit there and go, right, I'm going to stop what I'm going to do and I'm actually going to listen to you. So you're not still trying to deal with your emails. You're not still trying to get on the phone. You're not still trying to do whatever job it is you were doing in the meantime. You're actually going to sit there and go, right, what do you want to say to me? And also pay attention to body language, not just theirs, but your own as well. There can be some really key things that can help encourage someone to listen. Eye contact, relaxed gestures, make sure it looks like you're paying attention to that person so they feel like you're listening to them. Even nods of acknowledgement, some really, really simple gestures can just really help them encourage and open up. And be open-minded. We all have our own biases. We all have our own ways of thinking that this is the best way to do it. This is not. It might be a piece of work or something that you've planned and taken a lot of time in, and this person's challenging you on it. And now you're a bit like, well, what do you know? I've taken ages on this. But they've got a different perspective. So actually, don't go in with those biases. Be open-minded. Sit there and think, okay, what have you got to say? What is your challenge? And ask questions. They might have a really, really good reason for having that challenge, for having that concern, or they might not understand. So, and that also might give you the opportunity to rethink it, look at things from a different perspective yourself, and clarify. During that conversation, clarify what it is that person what they're telling you. So if they're asking you a question, if they've got a query about it, you can go back and go, so you're asking me this, and they can go, no, actually it was that, or you want to have a better clarification about what time we're working, where the place is, what the venue is, whatever it may be. And they can come back and affirm or not. And therefore, by the end of that conversation, by the end of that, you're having a two-way conversation and you're clear about what it is that you're talking about. So what do we hear? This is just a really quick example of 3 comments. The gate is broken. Is the gate always tricky to lock? Sorry, I'm late. I had some trouble with the gate. Now, ultimately, those 3 people are telling you on a really basic level the same thing, that the gate is broken. Now, the first one comes out and says it outright. So you might sit there and go, oh, the gate's broken. I need to take action on that. With the other 2, though, is the gate always tricky to lock? Would you sit there and think, would you, make the next connection as to actually there's something I need to address here? Or we just say, yeah, it is actually. Yeah, we always have problems with that gate. And again, with the third one, sorry, I'm late. I had some trouble with the gate. Again, would you sit there and go back to that sort of first thing? The gate's broken, it needs fixing. Or would it just be, yeah, no, don't worry, it's all right. That's fine, we can crack on now. Do you know what I mean? So you're acknowledging that they've spoken to you, but actually are you listening to actually what their underlying concern is there, which is that the gate is broken. But that's just an example of 3 different ways of saying ultimately the same information, but we might process it very differently because of the way it's presented to us. So the reporting gap. I'm sure this is something that people are familiar with or have heard about, but basically it's something that one of the key reasons actually why CIRAS is in existence, really, because I think we're all aware that actually not everything that people have worries about is reported or is necessarily listened to. So the reporting gap is basically the difference between what is reported and then all concerns, basically. So we have all concerns out there, all issues that go on, that people get seen or aware of on their day-to-day basis, and then we have what's reported, and that difference in between is the reporting gap. And I said, obviously, CIRAS is one of the ways that we can help that, but also we're hoping by encouraging that more open listening culture that can also help close that gap. So how does fostering a listening culture do this? Or how can you foster a better culture? So there are lots of reasons why people don't listen. It might just be that they're really busy, they're stressed, they've got lots going on around them. They've got a deadline. There's just, a multitude of things that they've got that's taking up their brain power, to be frank, and therefore they just haven't got the capacity to listen. They might be afraid of hearing something that they don't want to hear. It might be a challenge on something they know that's quite right, but I don't want that. Or it might be something that's a difficult conversation, and therefore we can become quite closed off to it. It might even be a personal criticism, either around something they've done or they've planned or the way they've gone about a task. So all these things can close ourselves off a bit to listening, and we can sort of go around with our headphones on, so to speak, and not hear what people are saying to us. So how can you promote better listening? One, lead by example. Really simple one. Take the time out, listen to people. Within your organisations, you can reward active listening. Actually, so-and-so said this, and actually this resulted in an excellent result. Actually, we know someone said they were late because of a gate. And so we thought, oh, maybe we should fix the gate. So sit there and give that reward. React positively to feedback. And always remember, feedback can be positive or negative. And actually, it's how you use it that really matters. So listen to what people are saying and have that positive reaction. Training and performance systems to promote listening. As I said earlier, actually, we focus a lot on speaking up and whatever, but often, if you go back to your school, you're not always taught how to listen properly. So actually, what can we do to help with that within our organisations? Be visible, share those examples of good. I mean, that can be taken across, obviously, not just in listening, but anything we do, whether it be, teams have performed brilliantly, they've had a really good example of this, but anything that just reinforces that positive message is always good. And celebrate when people speak up. See what difference did that make? So-and-so said, like, we had the welfare facilities at this location were inadequate or there weren't any. So now we've got toilets in place, or we've got hot and cold running water, which wasn't there before. Fantastic. Now people, the knock-on effect of that is not only people can actually go to the loo, but they're also not so worried about having a drink. They feel more refreshed, they can get on with their work. Let's celebrate what these things are, not just the 90%. We've got 3,000 close calls this month, but actually, what did that result in? What were the positive actions that occurred as a result of that? Really, really importantly, there are plenty of options out there to find someone to listen to you. So one of the most important and hopefully most immediate ones will be to talk to your line manager or supervisor, basically whoever's in charge where you are at the time. And hopefully, in the majority of cases, they'll be your first port of call, and they'll be able to, if it's something they can't deal with, then be able to direct you to the right place, or they'll be able to have that conversation with you, and then you can progress that concern. Or talk to your health and safety team. You might want some advice or some feedback. Depending on where you work, you will have union reps or other safety reps available to you. Again, they will also always be able to listen. Raise a close call or near miss. Every organisation will have their own reporting channels and different ways of doing that, but it's really, really important to raise these things. All the information that we can get, the better we learn, basically. And also, each company will have their own reporting channels, and these will vary from company to company. So it might be things like an internal form, a generic email address. It might be sort of anonymous cards that you put in a box. There will be all sorts of routes. And also, there'll be various things like fault and default reporting channels for different things. So there are plenty of options out there for you. And in addition to all that, there's also ourselves at CIRAS. And we are that additional reporting tool for you. So you may think, with all those options available to you, why do you also need CIRAS? Why do you also need confidential reporting? So it comes down to what you don't know can hurt you. And actually, independent research across multiple sectors, so this is not just transport related, but elsewhere as well, like the health sector and other places, actually suggests that in reality, less than half of people speak up, less than half of staff speak up. And that can be for a multitude of reasons. It could be because they're quite used to seeing whatever it is that's not quite right. But quite often it also found that research that actually, even when they're in a safety critical moment, so to speak, there's something happening around them, they still don't necessarily challenge or speak up. So actually, that speaking up culture is, much how we think it should be relatively easy, there's still a lot of things that don't get raised. And reporting and listening behaviour is very complicated. There isn't a one size fits all. There's no sort of silver bullet that's going to suit everybody in every circumstance. So the more options you have and the more awareness you have, the better. And this is really where CIRAS fits in. We provide that extra additional tool and a completely impartial, independent and confidential service where people can talk to us and we listen without judgment. We're just there to listen to what they have to say. And really importantly, we also enable reporting across companies. Quite often you'll find that actually people are quite comfortable within their own environment, with their own team, they're familiar with them. So some of those barriers to reporting aren't necessarily there. But actually, when it comes to reporting across company boundaries, they either don't know, how to use those, or actually they don't want to challenge a client, especially if it's a sort of client-contractor relationship, and they don't want to challenge the client, and that can create additional barriers. So how does CIRAS work? Again, we're here, we're listening. And basically what we're encouraging everyone to do is if you see something unsafe, tell someone and use whatever route works best for you. And that might be different depending on the circumstance, depending on the environment you're in, depending what the concern is. And so we're that additional route. And we always do encourage people as well, if you're not sure, do get in touch. We're here to listen. So if during the conversation we have with you, we're not the best route for you, we will help you get to it. We won't just sort of sit there and say, this is not for us. We'll have that conversation with you, sit there and go, do you know what? The best way for you to get this resolved is actually through here. So, if you're a bit unsure, come to us, have that conversation, we'll listen and we can help. But how the reporting process works. So we have two main points of contact, which is our free phone number and our online form. And these are also brought together in our reporting app, which is free to download and works on iPhone and Android. There is a QR code later on, by the way, just for if your phone's ready. But it just means that you don't have to remember any details. You can just download it on your phone, so it's there. But the initial contact is normally relatively brief. It's just a quick overview of your concern and some really basic contact details so we can get in contact with you. Our reporting team will get in touch and they'll basically arrange a time for you to have a conversation with us. So it could be on a rest day, depending on what your shift is, maybe on a lunch break, but basically a time where you feel free to be able to chat. And then during that interview, as I say, our primary job is really just to listen to you, to listen to what your concern is, to hear you out. And then we will obviously ask you a few more questions to try and get to the bottom of your concern. So what do you think the risk is? What do you think might happen if this is not resolved? What would you like to see changed? And then really, really importantly, we're going to ask you some questions to make sure we can protect your identity, because we are ultimately a confidential reporting service. So those questions will be around things like, has it been reported before, by how many people, etc. But I'll explain a bit more about that in a minute. And then all you have to do is talk, and then we basically write up the report on your behalf. So all you have to do is have a conversation with us. We write up the report on your behalf, and then we send it into the relevant company, making sure your identity is protected. So it could be about your own employer, or it could be about someone else. It could be about, for example, Network Rail or a train operator, or another contractor or someone else that you've seen around. And then it's basically our job to kind of do the legwork, really. So we send in the report. We have contacts in all our member organisations, so we liaise with them to get a response. So we do not investigate the concern. The report goes to the company, and the company is given the amount of time to investigate, and then come back to us with that response. And then we get that response back to the reporter. So we will always make sure that the reporter gets a response to close that loop. And then we also ask for feedback from the company and the reporter. So, from the company to then go, actually, was this useful? Was this something you're aware of? What actions? Is there any shared learning for you? Those sort of questions. And from the reporter, has this resolved your issue? Are you happy with it? Is there, any feedback? How was the whole process for them? So we get feedback from both sides. Now, I always put a little bit of a caveat in here to sort of sit there and say, I'm not going to guarantee that if you come to CIRAS, 100% of your concerns are going to get resolved to your satisfaction every time, because actually there might be a really, really good reason why things are being done how they are. What we will say is you will always get a response. And that will give you an explanation as to why things are doing. So if there's been a change in process, an update to a standard, someone's reviewed their risk management and changed something, actually, if there's a good reason, then they'll give you that explanation as to why it's happened. But if you don't like it, then there might be other, ways of sitting there and going, actually, I don't need this. But hopefully it will at least give you the explanation and better understanding of why that change has occurred. So that's just my little caveat. I'm not going to sort of guarantee that everything's going to change 100% of the time, but you will always get a response and you will always get an explanation. So we listen to a wide range of concerns at CIRAS, pretty much covering all aspects of health and safety. So these are just some of the most common areas we get. So welfare facilities. I'm sure this will come as no surprise to a lot of people, but the welfare facilities are not always completely up to scratch. Either some places non-existent. But we basically get concerns about, access. Can people access the toilet? Do they have hot and cold running water? Is there someone to take a break? Can I get something to eat? Those types of things. Equipment can obviously range from anything from small tools up to vehicles and plant machinery and stuff. So quite a big range. But the most of the concerns we get are normally either people don't have the right equipment to do the job they're doing, or it's not maintained. Those sort of things. Things like rules and procedures and unsafe practices. There are lots of rules and procedures across the railway sector. And actually, there are quite a few local variations as well. And sometimes they're local variations for good reason. Sometimes they're just local variations and people don't really know whether they're right or they're wrong. And many of our members work across various different regions and routes and industry, and will sometimes come across different ways of doing things. And it's a bit like, okay, which is the right way? What should I do this? So it can be clarifications about those sort of things. And sometimes people just take shortcuts, and then those shortcuts become the norm. And you'll be like, I thought we were supposed to do it like this. Actually, let's have a look at what's happening. Then obviously there's things like hazardous substances. Again, are they stored, managed, etc. Training and competence. Again, is it up to date? Fatigue, always an issue. How it's managed, and some of the causes behind that. Is it because people are short-staffed? Are travel times taken into account? Other pressures. People's environments. That's basically your working environment. So whether you could be at a depot, you could be in an office, you could be driving a vehicle, whatever that environment is that you're normally working in. Health and wellbeing, and covers quite a broad range of issues. And a lot of these things also will obviously be interlinked. But it can cover all sorts of things around access to support. Is your job, potentially impacting your health and well-being? Things like hand-arm vibration, musculoskeletal stuff. If you've not got the right equipment or things like that. So there's all sorts of different things in there. Environmental concerns. Again, quite a broad coverage. Most of the things we get are around things like fly tipping. Stuff being left in and around, how materials, if there's spills, how materials are managed, but it can also cover things like, sustainability issues and stuff like that. Obviously, infrastructure, there's a lot of infrastructure, whether it be track or buildings or, things like that. So anything that might impact that. And culture is always quite an interesting one. We do, and it's a growing topic for us at CIRAS as well, actually. So we do get quite a number of concerns around culture, and that's sort of the environment where people are working in. Like, do they feel they're in an environment where they're encouraged to speak up? Where they feel free to be able to sit there and challenge and sit and go, this isn't safe, this isn't, or do they feel that actually they're being ignored, and actually, their team, their management don't take their concerns seriously and just sit there and go, I just want you got a deadline, crack on, get on with the job, just get it done. So some of those sort of issues. We have also taken concerns around a wider environment of sort of bullying and potential harassment. But again, we can't take one-on-one concerns because obviously we can't protect the confidentiality. So we can take those wider culture issues. So if it's impacting, a wider team of the business, how people operate. If it's a one-on-one, like someone is being personally bullied or harassed by another individual, then we'd have that conversation with the reporter, and we'd probably redirect them elsewhere, either through an HR channel or unions or somewhere appropriate. But we'd have that conversation with them to help them get to where they needed to. So, as I said, confidentiality is obviously key to what we do. It underpins everything we do at CIRAS. So as I mentioned, one of the key things we check when we're having the conversation with the reporter is, has it been reported already? By how many people? How many people are affected by the concern? Where is it? Is it specific to a certain location? So those type of issues, to see how many people it covers, to make sure it doesn't narrow it down into too small, so anyone could potentially be identified. We have secure IT systems. The reporter's identity is only known to our reporting team, which is only sort of 3 people who can access that information. And also all staff sign a confidentiality agreement. So we do take that confidentiality very, very seriously and do protect it. We do try and share as much information as we can in the reports, except any information that could identify the reporter or anybody else. So we do not identify individuals during our reporting process. Sometimes that means the level of information we can share is reduced, because if you put in too much detail, you're narrowing it down too much. So there can be a balance there. But again, that's a conversation we can have with the reporter and also with the member company as well. Sometimes the member company might, who's responding might come back to us and go, actually, we need to know this, if that makes sense. In which case, again, we can have that conversation and go, actually, what level of information can we get? Because most of the time the reporters and the companies know far more about the issue and the location than we do. So we'll always listen to what they say as well and take some judgment on it. I'm just going to share with you just a few things. We recently, at the end of last year, did our rep survey. For those of you who aren't familiar, in every of our member organisations, we have what we call a CIRAS rep, which is our point of contact in their organisation. So I'm just going to finish off with a few little stats, which I thought you might find interesting. So we asked our member reps, tell us about health and safety reporting in your company. As you can see, quite positive. The first question is they're confident that staff report health and safety concerns when they have them, and that's quite good. It was sort of around 90%. We asked them, do they think staff are aware of how to raise any concerns they have? And again, that's pretty high, about 95%. But they also acknowledge there may be some concerns that staff find more difficult to raise. And so probably about sort of 65% people sort of said, yeah, actually, there will be some issues that are more challenging. So, of course, we followed up with a quick, what are those types of issues that you think are more difficult to raise? As you see, a lot of people came back and with none, they just thought, their staff are willing to raise everything. I always sort of do a slight challenge that one, going, hopefully that's the case because you've got an excellent reporting culture, but also is it that you're not listening? Depending which way you want to look at it. But as you can see, actually, the sort of issues that our members think that staff might find difficult to behave, 2 of the biggest ones are actually around managers and colleagues' behaviour. So actually being able to challenge either your own direct supervisor or management or your own colleagues. A lot of people are not very comfortable with that. We tend to avoid conflict. So that probably doesn't come as a massive surprise. Other issues are things that I suppose are more personal. So mental health, bullying, harassment, and also issues at home or in their personal life that might impact them at work. To sort of sit there and go, actually, I'm having a really difficult time with this. So actually that means my concentration levels are really low. I can't focus. So those type of issues. But also those kind of things about those general day-to-day minor issues, those things that we become blind to. They just become the norm. We see them all the time. We just think, well, that's just what happens, isn't it? So that just gives you an idea of some of the sort of things that our members think are more challenging to raise. And this is a question, when reporters come to us, we ask them a range of sort of safety culture questions. And one of the questions we ask is, how seriously are reports taken in your business when they come to us? So we thought we'd ask our CIRAS reps, who majority of them work in sort of compliance or health and safety or those types of teams. So as you can see, our reps responded very positively that if a health and safety concern was raised in their organisation, it would be taken seriously by managers, and about sort of 98% came back and said, of course it would be. And just for information, when we ask our reporters the same question, it's less than 50%. So it just shows you the difference. I mean, obviously there are going to be difference in those 2 audiences, but also we did go back and sort of ask managers and staff feel differently about how well health and safety concerns are dealt with, and actually a lot of our reps did acknowledge that would be the case. So just over 40% said yes, and about 50% said, no. So a bit of a split opinion, but there was some acknowledgement that there might be some difference in how staff and management view how well things are dealt with. And the final follow-up to that was, did they think being a member of CIRAS helped assure staff that health and safety concerns would be taken seriously? And I'm glad to say, again, that was quite largely positive, which is always good for us to see. So that's just a quick overview of some of those sort of things. This is an overview of our reporting and our contact information. As I say, the QR code there will take you direct to our reporting app. It's completely free to download. And that's our sort of our free phone numbers. We operate in the Republic of Ireland as well as the UK. So we do have to have a different free phone number for them. We do still occasionally get free posts, believe it or not, not very often, but occasionally. And also, you can follow us on LinkedIn, where we do share some blogs and articles and things like that. So always feel free to do it. And please have a look at our website. You can just register on the website with your work email address, and that should give you access to some further materials, blogs, information, and stuff like that. And thank you very much. That is me. Any questions? I think there is one question in the chat. I think I'll stop sharing.
There is. Thank you, Katie. So what we have to have that one question. It looks like we've still got about 20 minutes available for questions here. Although if we run over on that, there is a conversation on LinkedIn, on the PWI LinkedIn page, so we can carry on any discussion arising from this. We're open to raising hands, and we can take people in turn if they want to ask the question directly, but we've certainly got one from Rami in the chat, and we can pick those off as we go as well. If that's visible to you, I'll let so
yeah,
this
I can
is
see that.
Yep. So the question from Rami says, do you do any sort of investigation to make sure things are accurate, or is it just criticism of the company? Also, do you share the report with the reporter before sending it to the company?
It's quite a good question. One thing I would say actually is that quite often, very few of the reports are actually criticism, if that makes sense. They're more just, they are literally just raising concern. They're flagging an issue, if that makes sense. So most of them are not necessarily critical of the company, but just sort of saying, actually, when I'm here, I've noticed this, or when we've done this, we're doing it that way. Do we do any sort of formal investigations? I suppose the quick answer is no, but we do try. We've got a range of sort of questions, and during that conversation with the reporter, we do try and verify things, and we do try and weed out if it's someone who's got maybe perhaps got a grievance, if that makes sense, and they're coming to us for a personal reason as opposed to for a genuine health and safety concern. And again, I'm sure there are a few that slip through the net every now and then, because we are only human too. But we're quite diligent in the way we have those conversations with our members, if that makes sense. Do we share the report with the reporter? It's up to the reporter, to be fair. We do ask that conversation, especially if it's slightly more complex concern, and there are a few issues in there, then we will go back to make sure we've got the right summary and they're happy with it. Sometimes during that conversation, they'll be like, actually, this is relatively straightforward. I'm just happy for you to send it straight on. So that's part of that conversation with the reporter.
So we've got another question through from Stuart. Have you got any further information or theories on what is the cause of difference between report and reps taking things seriously? How much of it is down to the exact manager involved?
So that's a very good question. That's one thing when we do get things like our survey results out, I do try and share them with some of our sort of stakeholder groups, if that makes sense, and members, and sort of try and ask some of those questions as well to see what people think. Because I also think that it's a similar question to the one I raised earlier about when, are there any things that you think people don't report? And it's a none, which I always think is quite an interesting one to look at. So some of it, again, I will put a caveat that the fact that people are coming to us normally means that they've got an issue. And actually, I think at the moment it's around 65 or 70% of people who have come to us have tried raising their concern internally previously, and it hasn't been, they haven't got a response, or the response was not satisfactory. So, and when we do ask those questions as well, so why do you come to CIRAS, if that makes sense? And it's because their company, a large proportion of the company response wasn't satisfactory. It didn't answer their question. Or they just didn't get a response. So that will probably be one of the major reasons I would have thought about how people have that difference, because they're coming to us because they haven't been able to get it resolved elsewhere. So that's one of them. But so we do have probably just over about a third of people come directly to us. A lot of the time that will be because it's for another company, and they don't necessarily have direct route into those reporting channels. But sometimes it is because it's just something they either just don't feel happy challenging, they don't feel comfortable, so they just want to do it with their identity protected, for those sort of reasons. But I think as well, I mean, from our reps' point of view, as I said, most of them I think do work in the sort of health and safety sort of compliance arena. So I think a lot of the time they will be the people responding. So I think I'm hoping that obviously they take their jobs very seriously. So they'd like to think that everything is being responded to effectively. But I think some of it comes back to what we were saying earlier. It's about listening. Are people actually responding to what that reporter is actually asking? And I think that's why some of the things we're trying to do is really push that listening. It's all very well because there's been a massive push over the last sort of, 5-10 years. Speak up. There's lots of different routes for it. But actually, if we're not really properly listening to what it is that's being asked or what people are actually telling us, then we're probably not giving them the response that they're after, if that makes sense. But there obviously will be examples as well when you have people who are not very good at that process of listening and responding, and so occasionally it will come down to the personal manager involved. There will be other routes for trying to sort of deal that out, if that makes sense. That's beyond our remit. But I think in any business, wherever you are, there's always going to be a certain amount of that going on as well. So yeah. Just looking at the last question as well. Is the company obliged to respond to a report? What will happen if they don't respond? This is something we get asked quite a lot, actually. Obliged is quite an interesting question. We don't have any we can't fine anyone, or we can't, we haven't got any enforcement powers. We're not a regulator. We haven't got that kind of body to sit there and go, you haven't done this. But so far, I think pretty much we get responses from everybody. They are obliged in the fact that actually they've signed up. They're members of CIRAS and they've signed up to our terms and conditions, and they've agreed that they will interact and partner with us, because we do very much see it as a partnership relationship. Also, majority of our members, to be fair, are members because they're mandated as part of the Sentinel rules. And therefore, again, they, as part of those Sentinel rules, they've agreed to be, to sign up to a confidential reporting arrangement and engage with that process, and take reporting and listening to their staff's concerns very seriously. So it's part of that wider thing as well. What will happen if they don't respond? Ultimately, we've sort of got a series of processes that it goes through. So our reporting team will initially sort of engage. If they're not getting any response from the company, then that will normally come over to me and my colleagues in the sort of more in the engagement side, and we'll try different routes. And then we can try and escalate up through different seniority within the company. We've also got a CIRAS committee, which has members from across the various different sectors within the industry, who might have colleagues. So we've got various routes to try and escalate, if that makes sense. And so far, they've been successful. She says, touch wood. I think other than one company a long, long time ago, but to be fair, they were so far down the line with not complying with stuff that not replying to a CIRAS report was the least of their worries, to be honest with you. So they, there was all sorts of other things going on. But I suppose, ultimately, if someone didn't respond, we could argue that they hadn't, they're not complying with their terms and conditions, which would mean we could cancel their membership, which, if their membership is a Sentinel requirement, that would mean they're no longer valid to work on the railway, because then they wouldn't be fulfilling all the requirements that are required under that. But as I said, the only time when that's ever been a scenario, there are so many other things going on that actually we were the least part of that those kind of issues, if that makes sense. So we've never had to enforce that, and we've always been able to work with our members to get a response.
So we've just come to the end of the questions in the chat. If you've got a question you'd like to raise, you can either drop it into the chat or raise your hand and we'll take you off mute to ask it directly. Thank you from Raleigh.
Yeah.
Give that a moment longer. Show before we wrap up.
Okay, guys, I'll speak to you soon. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.
If there's no further questions, I'd just like to thank Katie Johnston again for coming and speaking to us. I find it very insightful. I can see the rounds of applause starting to appear in this screen, but thank you so much for coming. Like I say, there is a dedicated page on LinkedIn if there's something arising afterwards that we can come back to. The next Lunch and Learn will be on the 18th of February, and that's elastic solutions for railway superstructures. Thank you, Katie, and I hope everybody find that useful.
Thank you for the invite.
Thank you.